for larger people.
Well, everyone, I would like to call to order the Monterey Peninsula Water Management Board of Directors meeting of November 13th. It is 5:01 p.m. and I'll have a roll call, please.
Director Oglesby,
Here.
Director Paul,
Here.
Director Eisenhart,
Here.
Director Riley,
Here.
Director Edwards,
Here.
Vice Chair Anderson,
Vice Chair Anderson called me. She's stuck in traffic and probably will be about 10 minutes late.
thank you. And Chair Adams.
Here. Thank you very much. We have a quorum. Are there any additions and corrections on the closed session agenda? Okay, thank you very much. Is there any member of the public who wishes to comment on anything on the closed session agenda today?
Chair Anderson, I see a phone number that has a raised hand.
You could please go ahead and identify yourself and make your comments. We'll have 2 minutes for comment.
Good evening. Margaret Ann Coppernoll speaking. From my perspective, it seems historically, legally, and operationally provable that Mpwmd already has latent powers with a long-established precedent. So an expansion of those latent powers should be considered a normal course of business with no need to revisit LAFCO. LAFCO approval should not be required, in my humble opinion. Its recent parcel annexation approval implies latent powers expansion agreement, but LAFCO's explicit approval is not necessary given the district's 1978 latent powers legal codification to operate as a water purveyor, which it has already been doing for an extended period. My hope is that going forward, you will put pedal to the metal, full speed ahead for eminent domain. God bless you all and happy Thanksgiving, for we have much to thank God for and each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Coppernoll. Thank you for your comments. Are there any other hands raised?
I see no other raised hands.
Okay, thank you very much. With that, we'll close public comment on the closed session agenda, and we'll move into closed session.
Leave the meeting. Thank you. Director Eisenhart,
Here.
Director Riley,
Here.
Director Edwards,
Here.
Vice Chair Anderson,
Here.
Chair Adams.
Thank you very much for that. All directors are present. With that, let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Join me. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic that stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Are there any additions and corrections to the agenda?
There are no corrections or additions.
Thank you. Are there any oral communications? I think at this point, this is the time in the meeting when anyone from the public can make any comments on anything that is not on today's agenda. Are there any members of the public who wish to come forward with public comment?
Chair Adams, I see Emma Thompson.
Yes, Ms. Thompson, if you'd like to make your comments, you have 2 minutes.
Good evening,
Good evening.
Anna Thompson, Carmel. I'd like to express my gratitude to Chair Adams, directors, general manager, council, and staff for your outstanding service to our community. I appreciate your knowledge, integrity, strong leadership, and your commitment to always pursue what is in the best interest of our communities. Thank you so much for moving forward with the buyout of Cal-Am. It is so costly, exhausting, and emotionally draining dealing with Cal-Am. Cal-Am's profit interests conflict with what is in the best interest of our communities. For example, Cal-Am continues to promote a problematic, very expensive, and unneeded desal plant, forcing the city of Marina to spend their limited financial resources to protect their water and coastal resources, while we, the ratepayers, are forced to assume all costs and liabilities associated with this flawed project. Now, we must continue to be on the lookout for any potential roadblocks that Cal-Am may pursue to slow down the successful completion of the expansion project. Also, we must make sure that the additional wells needed to store any overflow of the Carmel River are completed with no delays. I look forward to a new era when our water delivery system is community-owned and managed by a public agency that is accountable to the people it serves. Thank you so much for all your work.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Are there any other members of the public who wish to comment?
I see Michael Bear.
Mr. Bear.
Good evening, everybody. So congratulations on LAFCO. That was nice. And I know maybe we'll be. I know I sent you an email about it before your closed session, and I'm looking forward to hearing what Mr. Laredo has to say about that situation and what you're going to do about LAFCO. Hopefully, I guess that decision wasn't a final decision. Maybe it was a preliminary decision. So I'm hoping for an update about, is there more back and forth with the judge in the case? Is the case not quite resolved yet? And then it just seems to me that we don't want to go back into some place where you're going to get voted down 4-3. If it can be avoided, my recommendation would be to just put that one to bed. And I imagine Cal-Am might bring it back in at the eminent domain part of the process, but I think you got what you needed from that LAFCO decision and move on. But I just like, I'm not quite, I just like some clarity on what's going on with that process. And like everybody else, thanks for all you do. Look forward to moving forward. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bear. Are there any other hands raised?
No.
Chair Adams, I see no other raised hands.
Okay, with that, we're going to close public comment and move forward with our consent calendar. I hope the board has had an opportunity to review the consent calendar. Is there a motion to approve? Yes, I'm sorry, maybe I should ask that question and even ask the public if they'd like to pull something. That's some good ideas. I guess I can't hustle us on too quickly here. Yes, would you like to pull something?
Item 1.
Item number 1. Is there any other board member who would like to pull something from
I would
consent?
like item 4 and 5 pulled for a very, very brief comment.
Okay, 4 and 5. Thank you very much. Let me see if there's any member of the public that wishes to pull anything.
I see no raised hands.
Okay, very good. Then let's come back and we'll start with item number 1. And that would be Mr. Eisenhart.
Thank you.
Comments or
It's,
questions?
Page 11 in the packet is the minutes from the October 10 meeting. And this is more of a question, I think, for district council. We don't have mention, I didn't see mention in the minutes, I could be wrong, of Manat's submission ahead of the meeting. The letter that I commented on, and then the roughly 12 inches of exhibits. And I'm not suggesting that that should be attached, but I think we could talk about it in the minutes and make sure that it's referenced.
You could have a mention of it in your minutes. It is certainly a part of the administrative record, whether it's mentioned in the minutes or not.
I'm expecting that there will be no pebble, no molecule, and no boulder that won't be looked under by the fine attorneys at Manat. And I just would like to see something in this minutes that acknowledges that we received their 17 or something page letter and their 11 to 12 inches of exhibits attended there too. And the only other thing I would say is for accuracy, on page 12, again, this was an issue I addressed, but where it says Chris Cook and Evan Jacobs had their comments, and you can see that in there. And it went on to say, address the findings and feasibility. I might say some of the findings, but maybe that's a little argumentative. But those are my 2 comments on the minutes. Okay.
Is
Yeah,
it-
I think Sarah and I can work on something to meet both of those.
We'll go now to Mr. Riley. Actually, I had a question on the minutes as well, so I think I'm going to insert myself. I noted that it was indicated that 55 persons spoke for and against the adoption of the resolution. Is it possible for us to indicate how many people spoke for and how many people spoke against, or is there any benefit to that?
Their actual comments are part of the record, so if you wish to tabulate that, but it is a judgment call as to whether some comments were actually for or against,
Okay,
and there might be some discrepancy.
but should there be any question at all in the future, we do have the record that would
That's correct.
that would show it. We can make our own decisions with that. Okay, then I think we'll go to Mr. Riley and items number 4 and 5.
Yes, this is a question to Suresh, I believe, but it's on page 50. In item number, was it 4? Your first bullet point, your second list of bullet points, your first one talks about personnel costs, about paying anticipated amounts due to CalPERS. And my question is, why should we pay in advance? Is it possible that if we kept the money longer, paid it 6 months later, or whatever the cycle would be, don't we earn money on that as a revenue source, as opposed to paying it early and then losing that interest earnings?
Yeah, good evening, directors. That's a very good question. The rate of return that we get on our investments right now is close to average is, let's say, about 5%. PERS charges us about 6.8% interest. And what PERS does on the unfunded liability is not based on the declining balance. So what they would do is they would charge me the interest on the total outstanding balance on July 1st. And then what they would do is divvy it up into 12 equal payments. So we'll have to pay it. So whether we pay it, June, if we pay it in July, it's an advantage to the district because we are saving 6.8% interest cost. But if we pay it in December, we'd still be paying the 6.8% interest. It's going to be the the payment made in December, and we're not going to be able to earn that much interest if we just invested all that money at 5%. So it is better off for us to pay it in July to PERS and save some interest.
Okay, it was just a question. Thank you. And then on the next item on page 59, this is just a comment, and we can talk about this later, but it's the investment report. And the you list, I don't know, 25, 30 the CDs, but I'm just questioning about the order in which they're listed, not about the facts about it. The first column is the date it was purchased, and the maturity date is the date that you present us as the sequence to kind of understand it. I'm just wondering, as a district, rep here for me, I would like to see that reversed. I would like to see the purchase date order as opposed to security date. I mean, the maturity date order, because then I can track and see and maybe understand the interest pattern that's created in that, rather than your management need to deal with when it's due. And so it's just a management question for me. And I don't know, we can talk about pros and cons, but maybe you can just show both columns. But I don't, maybe not.
And maybe we'll give the full answer during the next Finance and Administration Committee hearing. But the whole concept of this investment is laddering. And so the rungs on the ladder are the maturity dates. So that's why we show it by maturity date. So you can say, boy, how much cash have we put out into the future? How much is near term? And so you're following the steps of the ladder. But I understand what you're saying as well. Because to figure out where interest rates are going, you kind of have to find one that was a 5-year that was purchased 2 years ago versus a 5-year purchase last month. There's pros and cons.
I know it's a management issue, but also it's a transparency issue for me. And that's just, a little bit of conflict, not just, anyway, no problem. Unless there's no other comments, I'd move approval of all three that were held back. 1, 3, and 4, I believe.
Actually, I don't think I took a motion for the entire calendar.
not have
So
a
perhaps we could
okay.
just make a motion for the entire calendar.
I'd move approval of the consent calendar.
Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you. Do we need to do a roll call vote again, or can we just signify?
Take a roll call.
Okay, a roll call vote, please.
I'm sorry, you can take a voice vote.
I can take a voice vote. That's what I thought. Okay, well, then I will simply say, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Nothing? With that, thank you very much. We'll close that item and move on to our general manager's report.
Well, newsflash, this just came in today, directed to Mary Adams, board chair, but really it's directed to Suresh Prasad, our CFO. We're pleased, this is from the Government Finance Officers Association, dated today. We're pleased to notify you that your annual comprehensive financial report for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2022 qualifies for the GFOA's Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. The Certificate of Achievement is the highest form of recognition in governmental accounting and financial reporting, and its attainment represents a significant accomplishment by a government and its management. So congratulations. We'll get another little gold disc to put on that plaque that'll say 2022.
Job well done.
Job
Thank
well
you.
done. Thank you so much, folks, Suresh and Dave. Wonderful.
And with that, I'll turn to the item 8, which is the status report. Sarah, we can put that up on the screen. We're going to skip the monthly report for the month of October and go back to what you would have received last month on the meeting that we didn't call, because that was a full water year conclusion. And there's a few things that we want to discuss and have you see. So here is the, this is production in the Monterey Peninsula Water Resource System, so limited to the Carmel River Basin and the Seaside Groundwater Basin. The one takeaway, well, 2 takeaways I want you to have here. Whoops. All right, am I dead? There we go. Let's see now. All right.
This one?
Yeah, I did fall asleep, so we'll have to figure that thing out. Okay, so here's the resource system with the Carmel River and Seaside, so it's limited to those two major sources. The one takeaway here is the target for the Carmel River, which I believe includes Malpaso in this case. Oh, no, it does not. It's just a little bit less than 3376 of the total water right. They didn't target the entire water right for the water year just to be safe. The actual came in 938 acre feet below. That's significant, as we talked about at the Water Supply Planning Committee. And your district engineer characterized this as perhaps not spending your paycheck. And later you'll see that we took out, or the system took out, some ASR stored water. And it's a little bit like not spending your paycheck and hitting your savings account, which is not a repeatable thing that we want to see happen. So we're trying to address going forward how we can compel Cal-Am to take a larger chunk of its Carmel River water right, which is among the most affordable water into the system. But we'll talk about that in just a second as well. Looking at the other projects and water rights, you can see the ASR recovery that I mentioned, 806 acre feet. That's from the savings account. So that's water that's no longer available for drought or any form of backup or buffer. The the Pure Water Monterey recovery was pretty much spot on. Our obligation is 3,500 acre feet of delivery. So there's a little bit of carryover from the prior year. Table 13 is a measure of a water right that's only available when the river's really flowing. So due to the rains, that's a real positive. We commend Cal-Am for trying to maximize that in the rainy season. And there's some decent news under Sand City that we did see productivity. They still are in need of the final permitting of their new source well. But, that project has struggled from time to time. And the last several months, we've seen some good production. In the production from all sources, so the importance of this is the annual total, and production for customer service is a measure of the demand. That's how much water has to go into the distribution system to feed the system for all purposes. And this is where, again, you can see that the Carmel River Basin was unfortunately, 950 odd acre feet below the legal water right. And ASR was 806 acre feet. That if we can find a way for Cal-Am to operate their system in a way that this doesn't happen, that would be to the benefit of the ratepayer, the benefit of drought savings and so forth. So that's one of the topics. There's several topics that we'll be trying to set up a meet with Cal-Am's staff coming up in the next few weeks. Again, you can see that the months that the table 13 happen are all the rainy season months, which is kind of de facto the way that works. And then Malpaso, our accounting here might be a little bit different than Cal-Am's because we cap it at 86, which is the water right off the river. Their reporting was a little bit higher, but their reporting is a water year and the limit's actually a calendar year. And so sometimes those types of years don't line up perfectly. And I want to show you where we pretty much are in total demand on the peninsula for the last 20 years. So the red star is approximately 2012, where in April of that year, the desal plant was originally sized at the size that was approved by the Public Utilities Commission. And now you can see that this last water year that we closed out was just over 400 acre feet below last year. And last year was one of 4 years in a row that were pretty much leveling out or attenuating. So in some respects, we think the drop between this year and last year was the heavy rains and the lack of irrigation. But it's still emblematic of the the trend either downward or flat below the 10,000 acre feet per year. So you've now got an 8-year run, which pretty much says that where we are at today, which is, forecasting the need for water supplies, how much do you use today? How much will you need in the future? And how soon will you get there? What's the slope of the growth line? And where we are today is clearly significantly different than where we were when the desal plant was sized back at the Red Star in 2012. This is recorded rainfall. You've seen this one pretty much, we're at the end of a period where it wasn't raining. I see that this week's forecast has already changed, but we were supposed to get, up to 2 inches of rain already here. Keep in mind the ASR season can only start December 1. So any rain we get now is just working to fill and then spill the reservoir. Once it starts spilling, then those in-stream flow requirements can be measured, and then you can start to see ASR. So preparation for ASR is another topic that we're putting on our list for that meetup with CalAm staff. And this is the cumulative rainfall for the entire year to date in the red line. As I mentioned previously, or actually maybe I have it in here. So exciting. So 2023 is the 8th best rainfall on record, and another 0.25 inches would have made it the 7th, but it was woefully below the 1998 record. Still pretty good. It's a top 10. And again, unimpaired flow, kind of hard to see with all of our pictures on the bottom, but didn't change much from the prior year. Or Sarah, yeah, if you can move us to the side, there we go. You can see very little happened in August and September, but the fact that there is a blue line means the river was flowing all the way to the lagoon for the season. Even though this is actually measured at Sleepy Hollow, there was flow in the river, and it did get pretty sparse in the last couple of months. I can be honest, but hopefully this week remedies all of that. So that concludes that report. And there's nothing to update on water supply projects other than Mr. Rowley's group has a luncheon Wednesday, and representatives of CalAm will be out to discuss the conditions and progress on meeting those conditions and the timeline for the desalination plant. A similar presentation was done at the quarterly Monterey County Hospitality Association lunch about a month ago. So there continues to be effort made to meet those conditions as imposed by the Coastal Commission in their conditional approval. Pure Water Monterey expansion, there are 2 contracts. Both have been given the notice to proceed, so they are mobilizing, and we should see progress actually out at the site soon. And it's a 24-month build, so we're looking at the end of the 3rd quarter of 2025 for kind of starting the testing and implementation of that. So, basically 2 years we're looking at. And that's it on the general manager's report. I don't know if Michael Bear's hand is up again to, there you have it. Oh, just went down.
Okay. All right. Thank you for your report, Mr. General Manager. With that, we will go to our report from District Council.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The board did meet in closed session at 5 p.m. We had more on our plate than we could actually consume. We had 7 items on the closed session agenda. We're only able to do CS1 and CS2, taking 3 of those items off. So we are going to return to closed session at the end of the public session tonight. During closed session, though, there was direction from the board on 2 items in particular. There was a motion by the board directing the district to file a complaint to acquire the California American Water Distribution System and to fulfill Measure J in accord with the October 10th resolution of necessity. That motion was made by Mr. Edwards, seconded by Director Anderson. And there was a 7 votes in favor, none opposed, all directors were present. That motion did pass.
Thank you very much for that update.
The second item was a request by the Marina Coast Water District that the district support its petition for review of the case Cal-Am versus MCWD, for review of the appeal related to Cal-Am's coastal development permit for its desalination plant. That petition has not yet been filed with the Supreme Court, but if and when it is filed, the district board did direct that the district ask the Supreme Court to take that matter under review. That motion was made by Director Paul and a second by Director Eisenhart. Again, that was a unanimous vote, all 7 directors being present. So the vote was 7-0.
Thank you very much for
No
that.
other reportable action was taken, but responding to Mr. Bear's question as to what the status was for the district's lawsuit with LAFCO. That matter is not yet fully resolved. The court did issue a intended decision. The next steps in that process are that the district will submit its version of a proposed order and writ to the other parties in the case, LAFCO and Cal-Am. They have an opportunity to discuss with the district how it should be worded. And if there is not a resolution and if there's disagreement, then that matter does go to the court and each of the parties can make their pitch to the court as to how the final writ should be worded. And finally, the court will issue its version of the writ, and then that provides directions to where the case is going. So it's a matter that is still not yet baked. That concludes my report.
Thank you so much for that. Are there any questions from the board on this report? Are there any questions or comments from the public on this report?
Chair Adams, I seen Michael Bear. A minute, please.
Mr. Bear, are you there? Okay,
Yeah, the reason my hand was raised before was to congratulate Koresh again on the, you guys are fabulous, financially transparent. I was, clapping, and I'm also clapping for the fact of your vote to proceed with eminent domain. But, it's just night and day between you and Cal-Am on the transparency, on the finances. I mean, I just don't understand why the whole peninsula doesn't understand why you guys are the best choice. So thank you.
thank you, Mr. Bear, for your thoughtful comments. Okay, so with that, let's move forward. And I will go to item number 11, which is oral reports on any director's activities, including reports on trips, conference attendance, and meetings. Mr. Riley.
I report, the water master met the 1st of November. It was a piggyback meeting with the full board and then with the subcommittee that just met right afterwards. The subcommittee is on using the replacement fund to help finance future water needs. It was a good discussion. There is going to be a follow-up effort to identify the options that the water master may have in relation to either raising money or figuring out how to get money into their structure so that they have something to help leverage others if they're asking for assistance in keeping the basin whole. So anyway, it's a work in process, but I'm very pleased that they're beginning to have that kind of discussion as a full board, not just as a committee, but this will be a report back to the full board and we'll be having that discussion in the future. So I'm really pleased with that. That's it.
Thank you. Any other members have anything to report? Seeing none? Yes.
Just one, listen to the Monterey One water board meeting, and the default dates for the expansion has been put in. So all that paperwork is done now. So they'll be moving on to discuss outfall and everything else. But that was one key thing that we finally got finished. I
Excellent.
think, February 26th is default dates. I think it is correct?
Yeah, there are two.
You,
February 26th, there's a performance start date and a delivery start date. Thank you.
yeah, thank you.
So one's 26 and one's in 27. But given the construction schedule that we have, we feel there's more than enough space.
Thank you for that. Okay, no other comments here. I'll see if any member of the public wishes to comment on this. Okay, seeing none, let's move into our action items. The first action item we have is item number 12, which is to consider the recommendation to the board to fund rebates in the California American Water System between January 1, 2024, and the availability of funding from the Cal-Am Water General Rate Case.
Thank you. And this will be the Water Demand Division Director, Stephanie Locke.
And I'm sorry, I look fuzzy, but so on this item, the district in Cal-Am's highly successful water saving rebate program is primarily funded by the conservation budget. It's part of the general rate case, or GRC, that Cal-Am goes through on a 3-year budget cycle. And it has to be approved by the California Public Utilities Commission, or CPUC. Annually, the budget has been about $300,000. And December 31st of 2023 is the end of the most recent GRC. The 2024 to 26 GRC is still pending, with a proposed $1.1 million in rebate funding, and a decision is hopefully expected in the next few months. Staff is requesting the board authorization to front fund the rebate program while Cal-Am awaits approval of funding in its 2024 to 26 GRC. When December 31st rolls around, the district invoices Cal-Am for the rebates issued through the current rate case. Every year at the end of the year, we send Cal-Am an invoice for the previous year. However, because the next GRC hasn't yet been approved, the district during the past 3 GRCs has front funded the program so that it doesn't need to be suspended until the decision is rendered. Cal-Am closes its books from the last GRC and must accrue funds as it starts a new GRC. In addition, Cal-Am has no guarantee at this point that the proposed rebate budget will be approved, and that results in a potential suspension of conservation programs at the beginning of a new GRC awaiting a decision. Our rebate program is very robust, and we see a consistent expenditure of $25,000 to $30,000 each month. In 2011, the program was suspended awaiting the 2012 GRC approval. And once funding became available, it took approximately 18 months to get the participation level back up to where it is today. There was a definite negative impact to the community and to the local vendors who rely on rebates to market their products. Staff is requesting the board authorize advance funding from the general fund reserve to continue the program until Cal-Am's GRC is approved and funds are available to reimburse the district. As mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, the conservation budget includes $1.1 million for rebates. Cal-Am management has agreed to reimburse the district when rebates are approved in the GRC budget. By approving this item, the district will process and pay rebates for a maximum of $200,000 through June 2024, which is the end of our fiscal year. Hopefully the decision will occur before then, but at this time, that's the request. And then we will invoice Cal-Am for the expenditures when they receive their GRC approval. There is a very slight risk of the funding not being approved, in which case the district would fund the program and then we would have to consider continuing rebates as part of our next budget cycle. Funding for this reimbursable expenditure was not included in this year's budget. And so we would be making an adjustment during our mid-year budget adjustment. If needed, as I mentioned, we would include that in next year's budget cycle. This item was discussed and considered by the Finance and Administration Committee November 6th, and the committee recommended approval. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Thanks very much, Ms. Locke. Are there any questions from the board? Okay, seeing none, I'll go out to the public. Any member of the public who wishes to ask any questions or make any comments on this item?
Chair Adams, I see Michael Bear.
Mr. Bear.
Hi, Stephanie. It's a great program. I'm glad you guys do it. I was just wondering, is that 1.1 million, is that for the entire 3-year cycle or is that per year? So if it's for the 3-year cycle, that's about 350,000 a year that's available.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Thank you very much. Okay, any other hands raised from the public?
I see no other raised hands.
Okay, thank you. So with that, I'll bring it back to the board, and I think that what we need to do is pass another motion that will consider advance funding of up to $200,000 from the General Reserve Fund to continue the rebate program. Is there a person interested in making a motion? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Eisenhart. So it's first by Ms. Paul and then seconded by Mr. Eisenhart. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? None? Very much. Thank you very much, Stephanie. That passes 7-0. Thank you. Okay, our next item is number 13, which is to consider authorization of $600,000 for acquisition of Monterey Water System Phase 4 activities.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What we're calling Phase 4 of the Measure J acquisition of the Monterey Water System it pretty much would take us through and including a bench trial. As you may recall from the report of District Council, in closed session, you elected to move forward with the filing of the eminent domain proceeding. That will open the door to a whole new series of activities, not the least of which is actually writing that filing, which is taking place right now. And the budget for Rutan and Tucker had pretty much been exhausted up through the October 10th hearing. So we're starting to incur costs related to this next effort up through the bench trial. And it will, as I said, open the door for discovery, depositions, site visits, and condition assessment, a variety of things that were identified in the staff report. And we don't really know what those are. So trying to define a scope of services is challenging at this point in time. We brought the item to the Finance and Administrative Committee hearing at $400,000, and we were admonished to try not to come back frequently. So I told them I could find another $200,000 easily, and that's what you see in this proposed request. My intent would be that we try to not use it all. It's not a free pass to spend money, but I do believe that we've got the talent in the team. The 5 consultants listed in the staff note have worked with the district on this project already. But more importantly, they've worked in other venues. So for example, our investment banker, Barclays, was the investment banker for Missoula. Our utility consultant, Craig Close and Associates, worked on the Missoula case and the Apple Valley case. Our financial consultants, Ref Tellis, have worked on the Bullhead City case, which involved an attorney that's been involved with American Water, involved an appraiser that's been involved with American Water. The attorneys representing Liberty Utilities in Missoula are co-counsel on our case, Baker Donaldson out of Chattanooga, Tennessee. So at a minimum, our consultants have seen what's been asked for in discovery before, what they've asked for in discovery before. We'll also be reaching out to some of the actual agencies or cities to try to pick their brains without the consultants. But then we have to define who our expert witnesses are going to be. So there's just going to be a variety of work that we're just now turning the page and getting started on. And so we feel this budget is probably more than sufficient to get us there through those processes. But as General Counsel has on more than one occasion said, we're entering a phase of the unknown. We really don't know what's going to be asked of us or what obstacles will be thrown in front of us and so forth. But we do need more budget to get the band back together and go through this next phase. So that's what this ask is for.
Okay, thank you for that. I've got one question and then I'll check to see if the others do. I'm just wondering about how we have just the language that we have used around this, because it seems that we're only asking for another 200,000 since we've already passed 400.
No, Finance Administration Committee approved 400, but said when you bring it to the board, if you think that you need more, ask for more. So the action item is for the full 600.
Okay, okay, thank you so much for that clarification. Any questions or comments from any member of the board on this item?
Just
Yes.
one.
Mhm.
These monies will cover our LAFCO attorneys too. Is that in or is that going to
Well-
be separate?
So we are tracking the LAFCO lawsuit separately.
Okay,
And there, in the report that you see at the end in the information items, where there's a measure J, so it's
Yeah.
item 17. It's in there. It falls below the, I think, the phase 3 block, but you'll see the CEQA attorney budget as a single budget item, the LAFCO attorneys as a single budget item.
okay, thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions from the board, I'll take it out to the public. Is there any member of the public present here who would like to make comments or ask questions?
Chair Adams, I see no raised hands.
And there are no raised hands. Okay, so thank you very much. With that, I will see if we can have a motion to approve the staff's recommendation.
I move staff recommendation.
Thank you. Is there a second? Yes, we have it, Ms. Anderson. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Are there any opposition, any nays? Hearing none and no abstentions, we will consider that measure closed on a 7-0 vote and move forward to the next item, which is a discussion item. Actually, we've done our action items. This is a discussion item, the update on the water demand by jurisdiction.
Thank you.
Mhm.
This is an item that's gone before the Water Demand Committee, but we felt that it was important enough to bring to the full board just as an informational or discussion item. What we've been working on, we adopted a supply and demand forecast last year, and the way the district does its demand forecasting, earlier I said you got to figure out where you are today and where you're going to be in the future and so forth. And we've relied on AMBAG's basically their regional growth forecast to be a measure of population growth, which drives, of course, residential water demand and also jobs growth, which we use as a proxy for the growth in non-residential water demand. And it's been a convenience that we've been pretty happy about because AMBAG's model, which is a 25-year model, has been tested and they like the results. They've compared it to 3 other models of different types and said that they're all within a certain band. And so they're highly confident of the effectiveness of their model. They've used it now for 3 cycles, which means, basically 12 different years of growth forecasting. In Exhibit 14A, you can see I've shown you some of the AMBAG documents that in your packet. Did the highlighting make it in the, oh yeah, it's in color. Okay. So I've highlighted certain phrases and sections. And what you can see is in the RENA document that AMBAG produced that had all the housing requirement numbers, there, in the timeline, it said, in May of last year that AMBAG will adopt a Metropolitan Transportation Plan, Sustainable Growth Plan, that the 25-year plan consistent with RENA. And then you go to that plan and you see the page that says we've adopted this, or this Metropolitan Transportation Plan includes the 6-cycle RENA. So you want to believe that these are all internally consistent. And then you can see the growth forecast, which is actually Appendix A to the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, is the population forecast that we rely on. And what they do is they take their numbers and then they push them down into the sub-jurisdictions. And there's a little bit in the highlights on that as well in this. So the whole point of Exhibit A is to demonstrate that the assumption is that these 3 things they do, the RENA 6-cycle housing numbers, the 25-year Metropolitan Transportation Plan, and the 25-year regional growth forecasts are all internally consistent. What we've discovered and what I highlighted in the table in the staff note itself is they're not. And so the disconnect is between population and housing requirements. And what you'll see, as an example, Carmel has a 349 units of new housing requirement under the 6-cycle RENA. But the growth forecast says they're only going to add 35 new people in 25 years. Similarly, the city of Monterey has 3,654 new units of housing. And the growth forecast says you're only going to have 1,469 new people, which is a pretty good deal because every person gets 2 homes. But it's counterintuitive for some of the others. Delray Oaks only has a requirement of 184 new housing units. And even with their unfinished cycle 5 and cycle 4 requirements, that's only about 250 total, 270, I think. Yet they're showing a 25-year population growth of 988, and so on and so on. And so as you look at that chart, there's a disconnect, a serious disconnect. Question.
Dave, do you understand this disconnect to be because when they are estimating population growth, they are not assuming that the housing that will be built will correspond to the RENA numbers. They are making some different assumptions. For example, Carmel has almost no new housing.
Well, when we had a discussion with AMBAG, they did say, well, they're intended for different purposes, but their words on paper say they're all internally consistent. And I think what they did is when you read the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, they said, well, the overall new housing starts in Monterey County. And keep in mind, AMBAG does this for Santa Cruz County and Monterey County. San Benito County, which is also under the aegis of AMBAG, actually does their own housing element, separate from AMBAG. But I think what AMBAG does is they looked at their overall housing countywide and they said, well, that number is bigger than what the 6-cycle requires. So therefore we've incorporated it, and then forgot to look carefully at how they allocated to the sub jurisdictions. And so I think that kind of on the broad scale, they are internally consistent, but at the sub jurisdictional scale, they're not. And that's where it's not like they change their assumptions for housing, because housing has to relate to population. I mean, they're one and the same, really. And this is where we've gotten into the double counting, triple counting issues that we identified earlier. And we've kind of put our stake in the ground saying people use water, not houses. And so we did our adopted forecast based on people. And obviously the housing, as it got allocated to sub-jurisdictions, just doesn't line up with the people. And so then you have to ask yourself, okay, if I'm planning water, what am I planning it for? The houses or the people? So what we decided to do was say, all right, even though we think it should be people, there's a disconnect. So let's look at it for housing. And I'll give you another example where it doesn't really hold. We had focused on growth when we did our adopted demand forecast. And there's a housing element, a sub-element to the county's housing element that's just Carmel Valley, for example, or the unincorporated Carmel area. And you look at that, and they were going to put some houses where the old airport was, which is now a nursery. There's Carmel Valley Village, which is over 100 units. There's September Ranch. There's a variety of these, but some of them have their own water supply. So we kind of looked at that and we said, well, the amount of growth at the unincorporated county inside the CalAm and district boundary, it can't grow much more than 11%, which is kind of a high growth rate because, there's slower growth in some of the cities. And that would be, I think it equated to maybe 300 new people or something like that. Well, the county's late with their housing element. And yes, Chair Adams, I did finally speak with Craig and I have a sense of what the schedule is. So we're going to see a draft out on the street soon, probably in December. So we'll incorporate their numbers, but the preliminary numbers we saw had almost 1,400 units of housing going in the unincorporated area of the district, which is way more than 300 new people. So the county's housing assumption kind of redirects housing from maybe the valley out to where the jobs are and puts it over here. So we've got to give credence to some of these housing elements. But in the county's case, that just tells us where their overall unincorporated county population growth may get located, which is different than a population growth forecast that just doesn't align with the housing forecast done by the same people, maybe a partition apart from each other. So what we decided to do was say, if you want to believe that houses use water, what would a typical house be in each of these categories? So the very low income, moderate, and above moderate, which are the categories for the RENA cycle. That's demonstrated in, well, so 14B is how we figure out, or what we, the district, say a type of housing we'll use. There's a blend of housing, and then we apply those factors, which are based on our capacity numbers for issuing a residential water permit. So there's some factual basis in how we're assigning how much water a home would use. And then in 14C, we said, okay, if you have this many units of this type in each of these cities, and the city of Seaside and the city of Delray Oaks and their housing elements had a significant number of their required housing to be put on the old Fort Ord parcels. So we had to take that out because it's not going to be served by Cal-Am in our jurisdictional area. So we backed that out as water served by others. And anyway, you can see at the bottom that we get a total sum amount of water for housing as if houses use water. And then the final page of 14C is the highly scientific methodology of saying, okay, here it is based on population, here it is based on housing, add them together, divide by 2.
Yeah.
And then our intent moving forward will not be to allocate this amount of water and then add the jobs, add the non-residential use. That's your total demand by jurisdiction and total. So when we get into the allocation process, our first salvo or our first proposal will be to probably take this bottom line number for each city and offer up an initial allocation of 1/3. You know, the idea being, here's 10 years worth of water on a 30-year forecast. And the difference between our 30-year and AMBAG's 25-year, we just assume same rate for another 5 years because we like 30 years because all of our debt on Pure Water Monterey is 30 years. You'll see 20-year forecasts in urban water management plans sometimes, but 30 is usually coterminous with your financing. So it's often needed in feasibility reports for debt and so forth. So anyway, we look at 30 years at the same growth rate. It is an average growth rate. So it does beg a few questions. We've got a city or two who says, we want to build all our housing in 8 years because that's the RENA cycle. And that disconnect comes back and says, well, okay, if you build it all in 8 years, what happens in the next 17 years or the next 22 years? Now that you've met all of the population, all of the housing needed for the population forecast, which is over a 25-year period. So there's still some unanswered questions that we'll never get answers to. So where we're at right now, from an allocation standpoint, is this type of thing. Add it together, divide by 2, add your non-residential, here it is. We're going to allocate you 1/3 of it. That may be subject to discussion with the jurisdictions. But the idea being, let's get you enough water so you can begin building, and then let's see how fast you build. And then we can adjust it based on what's really happening on the ground. To this, we will add the airport needs, and we've got to go through the airport master plan. We've got to add the Presidio's needs, the Navy's needs, and the Coast Guard's needs. I had been sitting on my thumbs on getting those letters out because of the county's slowness in getting their element together. We've got some other issues coming up with the county. By the way, just so you should know, there is what we call a builder's remedy, I believe is the
Or is that
term.
builder's revenge?
Builder's revenge. Yeah, and there's already a parcel at the mouth of the valley that may be filing an application under the section that allows the builder's remedy because of the delay in the housing element. And that would be about 105 units. And so we're tracking as much of this as we can to see what's real and what's not real. But there's not going to end up being a better methodology to predict at this point.
And by the way, on the builder's remedies, I've been talking to people in other jurisdictions about that, including Bay Area.
Yeah.
It seems like there's going to be a lot of litigation on that.
And
That's going to
the,
slow all that.
there will be, and you know, for Santa Monica is a good example. They've got, I think, 16 projects that are using the builder's remedy.
Oh my God, they're going to build like nuclear power plants next to people's houses and stuff. You know,
Yeah.
it's just ridiculous.
We have confirmed that while all of that nice bypassing of local land use regs works for the projects, it doesn't bypass the water availability issue. So we're not going to change our permitting regime because of some free pass by a city or the county. So, you know, we're still or the
The state is doing this.
Yeah.
And the deadlines were so impossible to meet for many, but
State.
yeah.
Yeah. But we're going to have, so, you know, let's take, for example, the unincorporated county, 105 units. We're already getting into, okay, our rules, and some of you may remember at the county's urging, we put in place something that said, well, if you go from raw land or ag land to residential, you got to take a haircut. You got to give some water back to the river. And if it's up to 4 homes, it's this much. If it's more than 4 homes, it's this much. Well, whether there's a builder's remedy that gets them the 105, we have to still enforce the haircut. And so we have to look at pumping records and we have to say, all right, what average are we going to use? And then what's your consumptive use? And then of that, we're going to give you 75%. And people go, oh, I could build more if you didn't take my water away. We're still going to take the water away. It's a policy that the county wanted us based on the general plan to do. So we're going to, but now that we're dealing with, you know, the first potential builder's remedy coming through the door, we have to start doing work that may be all theoretical because it may never get there due to lawsuits, but we're going to do it, but we're going to apply our rules as our rules currently are working. Stepping away from all of that stuff that's about to happen, this stuff, all we're simply saying is there's a disconnect between population and housing. We didn't do it, but we're going to try to accommodate it. And the only way we can accommodate it is this way, to split the baby in half and then use that time period to see what's really happening. That'll be our proposal to the technical advisory committee when they meet. We are going to get the letters out hopefully this week. It's Marlena. And she's raised some really good reasons why we should get those letters off to the Department of Defense sooner than later. So even though I was kind of waiting around for the county, I'm not going to wait around for the county anymore. But it's important that you know this is going on because when the jurisdictions sit down, they're going to want to say 10 years of water is not enough, or my housing need is bigger than my population need and we have to build the houses. And we're going to say, well, temper your things because the model that predicts population is pretty good. Then we'll probably have discussions about Sand City and Pacific Grove that have entitlement water. We'll have discussions about Seaside, who already has water sitting in their allocation. So do you only allocate new water and you get to keep your old water, or is this the new proposal? So there will be a lot to talk about. But at first blush, this is what we're proposing. You should understand it's not perfect. And there's no way to get it to be perfect at this point. So Any questions?
Yeah,
on-
just curious because of the need to add in the airport district and the Department of Defense. Can you give me an estimate of how much we're talking about?
Not much. Coast Guard hasn't built a thing in 30 years. The Navy has some credits and the Presidio has some credits. But the Navy has their innovation center. It's a very big project. But our conversation with them through the mailing is going to be, what do you anticipate in the next 15 years? What do you anticipate in the 15 or 16 to 30 year timeframe? Additions of square footage, what types of square footage? What are your demolition of square footage? And then there are some ancillary things like the central cooling at Naval Postgraduate School. Will that slowly go offline, or is it going to be maintained? At the airport, there's in their master plan, there's a plan for their 2 wells to do irrigation, possibly car washing, possibly toilet flushing. So we don't have an answer yet as to, does that mean you're taking existing toilet flushing off the CalAm system and putting it onto something else? So we don't have a good number for you yet, but it's going to be a low number. We're not talking anything more than probably 20 to 30 acre feet total.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
Thank
But we need to hear back. And, and if the Presidio says, oh, we're going to build another dormitory, well, we need to kind of know that one. So it'll be type of use, square footage. We're a little concerned not knowing what kind of science will be done in the Naval's Innovation Center. Will there be a high water use thing? They probably don't even know at this point. So we're going to have to look at it as square footage, but maybe plus a little bit back there for some, engineering program that's water intensive.
Thank you. So let's see if there's any other member of the committee or the board that wishes to ask questions. Yes.
These builders remedy lawsuits that were referenced, what is that about? What?
So if you do not have a housing element that is compliant with state code, and that there can be a variety of ways, you maybe didn't identify or entitle enough land that could absorb your entire requirement, then you're out of compliance. And so then the builder doesn't have to abide by all of the local land use jurisdictions rules and can get permission to go ahead and build. And I think you might know, Mayor, they go to the state for a rubber stamp, or they file a section 330 application or something. Yeah. But there's a process by which they get to go around you.
And each jurisdiction has its own responsibility, and the county is not going to make the time frame that was put forward. And I understand that there are many other counties throughout the state who are not going to make the time frame either, which would put the builder's remedy into play.
And they could adopt a perfect element that really does accommodate everything, but because it was late, it was non-compliant. So that was the door just got opened.
It's going to be rough.
So preview of things to come, information only, as we said, just discussion.
I would the only comment I would ask is, to the extent that there's a question about on a builder's remedy development, whether or not the district's water permitting regimen can be avoided. I don't know if that's an open question or not. And I would ask the district council maybe to think about, what are our options there, and understanding that, including, but maybe not limited to, requesting an opinion letter from the AG.
And I think the answer will eventually be, it depends if it's just a planning tool or is it a physical constraint. At the moment, it's a physical constraint. And therefore, the district's determination as to whether water is available or not has much more meaning than if it's a planning restraint. So for instance, a planning restraint would be when Mr. Stoltz said, well, we have an allocation, but we're not going to allocate for the full amount. We're going to put it out in tranches. Well, that's a planning constraint, not a physical constraint. So I think the answer is it probably is more enforceable now than it might be at some point. And we need to be very attentive to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll put you together with Stephanie Locke because she did look up and confirm that if you don't have the water, you don't have to permit, you know, what the land use agencies are being bypassed on. But I don't know what section of the code she found that in.
I think a lot of it has to do with the bill that passed, maybe, or maybe it was SB 330. Well, with that, any other questions or comments on it? Yes, Mr.
No, okay. Just a couple questions. Is the county the only jurisdiction that seems to be behind schedule? Are all the others within the range of success? And I'm curious about. Okay, next page. On page, in this same category, on page 89, you show a small percentages of how you rank or rate the water requirements for different pieces of construction. And I'm just looking at the last single family. Is that, has this been, this is standard we use now, right?
Yep.
So there's nothing new about this.
Well, it's changed over time.
No, but I
Yeah.
mean, this is the existing
Yeah.
calculations that you use now.
Yeah.
Okay, there's nothing new because of the,
Right. And you look at the fixture units and so forth, and you can kind of see that, like, you know, okay, that's a typical bathroom. Obviously, when you get to single family standalone, we up it to a master bath, and it's basically 2.5 baths. But those are, if somebody came in today with builder's plans, that's what we would assign the bathroom and so forth. The only difference here is we've undercounted landscape for the multifamily properties by not putting anything on it, because we're kind of trying to get it down to per unit. Multifamily projects aren't typically very heavily landscaped anyway. So it's much different than a single family home that, you know, in Carmel Valley or in Pebble Beach versus even a single family home in Seaside or Carmel, smaller ones. So that's the only place where maybe we're a little lax.
type of question I have is, whatever page you had where you added them up and divided by 2.
93.
Has that approach been through technical committee or things?
No,
Is
that's-
this- so that needs to be out there for reaction.
Yeah, and that's part of, and I'll hit the bullet points again on the next agenda item, but that's kind of where we're headed to the technical advisory committee. And even at the end of the day, they don't have the final say, so they got to bring it back to their mayors or their council members who are designated for our policy advisory committee. So right now, this is kind of prospective from our view of the world. I'm sure we will hear other views of the world.
And can I get a short answer to this question? How are you looking at Seaside? Because
So-
Seaside has 3 water sources.
Yeah, so Seaside and Delray Oaks are 2 prime examples of, and this is, Mayor, don't get mad at me, but the I don't trust you quotient here, because they've both taken an attitude that water's not available. And so they designed their housing elements with a huge amount of housing going into Old Fort Ord. Now, in Seaside's case, a lot of it is true because Campus Town is going to eat up a chunk. They're already building the enclave. It's eating up a chunk. And so when they get down to it, the net amount of housing that's necessary is a very small number. And of those, they have some of it being met with ADUs, and we're treating all the ADUs as being in our territory, not the new Fort Ord, because you couldn't fit them in the enclave or Seaside Highlands. Really, they weren't built in a way that really accommodates ADUs. So we've gone ahead and said, okay, all of Seaside's ADUs are going to be in our jurisdiction. All of Delray Oaks ADUs are going to be in our jurisdiction. But City of Monterey, Delray Oaks, and Seaside put a ton of housing into Old Fort Ord. The only one where I think it's close to true is Seaside. Monterey's got like 1,200 units or more potentially going into South Boundary Road just outside Ryan Ranch. As soon as we're able to open the doors and say the moratorium has been lifted in the Cal-Am service territory, a bunch of that's going to come right back. So we have that believability thing where, and this is why you do it in tranches, as Dave pointed out, because reality is going to be different. And Delray Oaks, for example, has one buildable lot. They could probably put in a fourplex. They did not include that buildable lot inside the Cal-Am service territory to meet any of their arena goal. Well, as soon as water is available for that lot, they're going to put something there. So we know that saying, oh, all our housing is going to go into Marina Coast service territory is simply not true. The level of truthiness, I don't know yet. And, you know, we have to plan for that as well. So if we told the city of Monterey, downtown mixed use upzone is available, then they're not going to build it all out here. And frankly, you'll get the land watches and others saying it shouldn't be built out here. You got to build closer to services. Mary's trying to build all her housing right on the 68 corridor. And so when you take that and you take Delray Oaks and you take Monterey at South Boundary Road and you put them all onto Highway 68 to go get their services, well, there's something about that that's not going to really work. So over time, it will all change.
But they will have roundabouts.
That's 9 of them, I think, right? Yeah. So we're trying to factor in a lot of this stuff to come to something that works to get water out there. But believability falls into the thing as well. It's like, how do you plan for something that you know is going to change? But this is what they're saying now. This is what got approved, and so.
And my last one question is, does Marina Coast have?
Did you want a short answer?
I was looking for a short answer.
Sorry
Does
about
Marina
that.
Coast have an allocation process at all? And
Yes. So when they got the franchise to serve the old Fort Ord, they broke the Fort Ord allotment into allocations and frankly sub-allocations. So even in City of Seaside, there's a total number for Seaside, and within it, there's a number for like the school, the private school, Chartwell. So from a project area, and so Campus Town, I think at full build out doesn't have a big enough allocation, which is why Seaside is doing some creative thinking about how to move some of its allotted water under the water master to maybe meet the remaining demand for Campus Town, that type of thing. So Marina Coast does have an allocation process. The amount of water that got allocated to the city of Monterey by no means is enough to meet the city of Monterey's housing element for arena that they've programmed for South Boundary Road. So they'll need more water. Marina Coast said, we'll find you the water. So as of right now, that's the plan. But if we can lift the moratorium, then the water will be here and it'll all flip flop. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Karen, did you have a comment?
Just one quick one. I consider this a heroic attempt to come up with something that can be used to plan. And I mean, I understand all these multiple issues about the methodology and then all the many, many uncertainties. You've mentioned a bunch of them. Maybe some of these, well, surely some of these uncertainties will get resolved along the way, but I mean, the future is uncertain, but we need to plan. So, I mean, I just appreciate your trying to come up with something that is basically as good as we can do at this point.
Well, and just to leave it at this, we want to keep allocating water and counting water as it goes out with permits because it's served this community so well. Other water jurisdictions don't. And so you just kind of wait until you're eyeballing, you're running out of water, but we're not giving up the method. And so you got to do the best you can.
Okay. I think we've had a lot of very interesting conversation on this, and I believe I will take it out to the public and see if there's any comment or question on this particular item, which is number 14.
Chair Adams, I see no raised hands.
Mr. Rowley?
Good evening, Madam Chair. Tom Raleigh, happen to be president of the Fisherman's Flats Neighborhood Association, Homeowners and Residents Association. And I've been back here since 81. I lived in that neighborhood 68 to 70 when I was at NPS. And when I got back here in 81, Highway 68 had nada, zero traffic signals. When I almost got killed head on by probably an attorney getting to the courthouse in a hurry for his court case, driving a red Corvette, I started asking some questions. And what I found out is that's why we have the traffic signals we have now. It turned out that the intersections all warranted them from traffic counts and accidents. Also, I found out and was given by the city of Monterey staff in the 85, 86 time period, the plans to 4-lane Salinas Highway. Never been done. And with all county development that's been approved, rubber stamped essentially by the county, and basically Laguna Seca Office Park, Tehama, Montera, Pasadena, you name it. They all said, the supervisor said, the hell with the traffic, we don't care. Approved, approved, approved. My neighborhood sued the county over the Montera development. And when they tried to move the affordable housing to Olmsted Road from out by York Road, and they had a traffic consultant that came up and said, the traffic will actually be better than by moving it in there, which was really nonsensical. But anyway, they had more money than we had. And so we didn't have the money to appeal what was a bad court decision. So the thing is, these problems on Salinas Highway go back to the early 80s. And there's one particular area I'm very concerned on because my neighborhood, Fisherman's Flats, we access mostly through Johnson Canyon Road. And that's one of the proposed 9 intersections for the roundabouts. And the hearings are coming up in the next 2 weeks. 3 weeks. I think the last hearing is December 6th out at the Monterey Conference Center. But the session that's being held out at Laguna Seca Office Park is the really big one that's follow up to the hearing that was held earlier this year. But it's finally a chance to make comments. One of the things I'm concerned about, you mentioned, Mr. Stoll mentioned, the airport is already planning its expansion for a bigger terminal and moving the terminal. They're adding flights to Chicago. There's growth there. So the thing is, we're not taking into account what we need to for the future. They're planning for traffic counts. They're not planning for the growth that the housing elements are giving. Just like when you brought up, you're going to make some changes. And I said, you're way ahead of time. You need to wait till the housing elements are out. And Mr. Stoll poo-pooed me, but it's true. Till those housing elements are final. And I understand Carmel's has been kicked back or something. There's some problem. And they're the only ones that have been kicked back. So
Thank you
anyway,
so much for your comments.
yeah, anyway,
We're gonna wrap
there's
it up.
some real problems. These are not new. They predate all of you people. And so, trying to come up with roundabouts is not going to solve the problem when we need increased capacity.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Are there any other comments? Okay, seeing none, we will accept this item. I think it was an update. I don't believe that we need any kind of a motion on this. And we will move forward to our next item, which was the number 15, water allocation process schedule.
The staff note speaks for itself.
Staff notes speak for itself. We will simply accept that item then.
Madam Chair, just one question. Are we going to try to stick to this? We've got the county behind right now.
Well, we've tried to, yeah, so it reflects the county being a little slow. We'll have to wait and see what happens. When, contrary to Mr. Rowley's thing, when he said you're putting the cart before the horse, we had already seen 6 city housing elements that were already out on the street. But we've not seen the counties. That's our best guess. But the highlight is we got to get the letters out to the special entities really this week, in order to get ahead of that
Yes.
and begin scheduling a TAC meeting kind of along that timeline.
Okay.
It'll break down after that point in time, but we need it done by August.
Any member of the board that wishes to make any question or comment on this item? Seeing none, any member of the public who wishes to comment on item number 15? Are there any hands raised?
I see no raised hands.
Okay, thank you very much. With that, we will close item number 15 and go down to the informational staff reports, which we always recommend people to read and see if there are any comments or questions from the boards or public on any of these items. None from the board, none from the public.
Just the only
Yeah.
comment is on item 16. I just love seeing this in the going back to transparency. Keep it up. I like seeing that report every month. I really appreciate that in the general board meeting, not just finance and administration.
Thank you. Okay, yes,
Madam Chair, we're ready to return to closed session.
thank you very much. With that, I will adjourn this meeting, but I have to ask you whether or not we're going to report back out after closed session, or will we come back into this board?
We will report at the next meeting.
So we can
So
adjourn this
it-
meeting then and go back into closed session and just
correct.
close. Okay, so please consider this meeting adjourned.